Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Intuitus webinar with a specific focus today on capitalizing on opportunities in the retail and consumer sector in the new normal. My name is Adrian Astley-Jones. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Intuitus. And before we go any further, I would like to introduce two of my colleagues who are key members of the panel today. Firstly, I'd like to introduce John Lowe, who has 20 years technology experience in B2C situations and previous experience and positions with Microsoft, Accenture, and Sony. And secondly, Jonathan Summerfield, who is a 25-year CTO in retail, multi-channel retail, e-commerce environments, including senior leadership roles with Tesco, Ladbrokes, and Marks & Spencer. So I'd like to thank both John and Jonathan for joining us today and share their thoughts and experiences. Briefly, before we move any further, we have the agenda. These are the three main areas that we are looking to discuss today and hopefully share our thoughts and thinking. So how can COVID-19 has impacted the customer experience? Who are the winners and losers out of this at the moment? And where are the new opportunities and how you can take advantage of them? So that is our agenda. Before we go further, I would like to point out that we have a questions facility, which is via the chat on the GoToWebinar control panel, which you should have access to. Please ask any questions you like whatsoever at any point during the webinar. No problem with answering those questions as we go. No need to wait to the end to ask them. So on that basis, what I would like to do is really move on to the first agenda item, which is COVID-19 and the impact on the customer experience. And what I'd like to do is perhaps ask John Lowe to start off and give his views on what that is. And of course, you know, the context we all know is that the retail sector has been dramatically hit. I mean, stating what is very, very obvious. But the question is, you know, have there been verticals within retail and consumer which have been better off, worse off? You know, what are the dynamics in there? What is that current impact and what are we seeing out there? So, John, if you could perhaps start and give us your thoughts on that area, that'd be great.
Sure, thanks, Adrian. Hi, everybody. As Adrian says, I'm sure everybody's aware of the impact that COVID-19 has had on the customer experience, especially retail and consumer. Certainly here in the UK, we've seen many retailers that have, as we say, forced to temporarily, or even today, we're hearing big names that are permanently closing the doors, reducing their hours, laying off staff, not just in places like apparel, fashion, which you traditionally see as retail, but also non-essential retail, the wider consumer sector, so things like fitness, gyms, and leisure facilities, and so on. And I guess what we're seeing is that as a result of this situation is there's a rapid, I guess, acceleration and adoption towards online and apps. You know, we've already got wide adoption already, some more than other in different countries. It's more that the change in consumer behavior has come forward perhaps by maybe 2 or 3 years. What we think maybe we could predict behavior would be then is happening right now. And that shift in consumer behavior, I guess, has resulted in many online services, such as supermarkets, Netflix, etc., being unprepared for that unprecedented and unplanned forecasting demand. So we've got food and beverages, for example, moving and pivoting to takeaway, for example. And then I guess we've got the new normal, the future normal, which nobody can really quite predict now. We were maybe 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago having some line of sight on what that could look like, but as we see regions in countries and cities in countries returning to lockdown measures, that uncertainty is now continuing over what the future of retail might be. Companies that have benefited from government assistance, for example, here in the UK we have furlough schemes and business rate deferments. Other countries have similar things. Now that those are ending, those are tapering, I guess we're seeing that back to the first point, that physical locations, businesses are now actually saying, right, we need to close. We don't need this physical space anymore.
Okay, and I'd like to bring in Jonathan Summerfield now. Jonathan, what are you seeing out there in the market, and what's your view on the current impact? And this sort of maybe trails us into sort of the winners and losers part of the subject today. I mean, is it a very clear binary view, which is you're either doing extremely well here because you are, digitally enabled, you've got a really strong management team, you know where your data is, and all that good stuff, or the opposite of that, which is you are never really at the forefront of digitalization, and therefore you are just immediately left behind under this current circumstance. And to give you a context on that, which everyone listening may or may not be aware of, from an Intuitus point of view, we are having numerous conversations with what I would describe as tier 2 retailers and grocers, both in Europe and North America, where a lot of the tier 2 grocers and retailers are less digitalized, if that is the right phrase, to capture any opportunity, or at least to hold their market share at the moment. So I wonder, Jonathan, an example of that, the tier 2 retailers in the UK, for example, people like the Co-op, you cannot order food online from the Co-op. What does that mean for their customer experience? What does that mean for changing that dynamic, pivoting their business? Jonathan, is it binary? Is it winners and losers, or are there some firms, retailers and consumer businesses that are in the middle that are just surviving?
Yeah, hi, Adrian. Thank you for that question. Look, there are obviously some examples that are binary, like Trimark or Co-op, who obviously got on the bandwagon of digital a bit too late. But what we have seen is, certainly in the last few months, but even starting before that, is the acceleration of move to digital has certainly taken off. And the last 3 months has really focused people's minds on that. So the people that we're talking to, and the retailers we're talking to, although they were doing digital, what they've started to do is focus even more on digital, not only in terms of customer experience and selling, but also internally as well. I'm sure everyone on this call has seen a massive acceleration in terms of use of digital tools working from home, because there has been no other alternative really for a large majority of us. But for the retailers themselves, yes, of course, you have a lot of losers who haven't been able to move digital, and some people just can't because they just physically are not able to work digitally. But we do see people in between, and those people in between have really started to think about, if they hadn't started already, they've started to think about accelerating their digital plans, and all those plans around maybe replacing their ERP system or anything that's non-digital focused in terms of providing a different customer experience. Those sorts of plans have been paused for sure. And so yeah, I guess 2 camps really to answer your question. It's those guys who have just not been able to do digital at all, and are probably disappointed with themselves for not foreseeing this, but also those that had digital plans but have now accelerated those plans quite a lot quicker than they previously would have done.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. And going back to John Lowe, in terms of the challenges to become a winner, or if you're in that, shall we say, losing bracket at the moment, is this a overcoming legacy technology, turning new ideas rapidly into delivery? How difficult are some of these technology challenges, and is it a function of purely technology, or is it a function of having the right skills, the right CTO and development teams and right partners? How difficult is it, especially in a private equity backed environment that we are all operating in, to turn the tide or to make these changes?
I think it's a great question. I think fundamentally it's like a lot of, let's say, change programs where you've got a paradigm shift in how you're working, which starts at the top. You can have the best technology and the best processing platforms and so on in place, but it needs to be driven from the top. There needs to be the courage and the culture to actually meet some of these challenges head on. If we look back to 2008-9, the last financial crisis, when the Ubers and other unicorns kind of arose, a lot of it back then was these companies creating a new way of doing things and then waiting for the consumers to come. You know, the mobile adoption was much lower then. People were pretty much stuck in the way that they did things. What we have today is almost that situation flipped around, where consumers are increasingly more and more technology savvy. Everybody pretty much has a mobile device in the pocket. And now they're demanding these ways of doing things. They expect to be able to order things online. They expect to be able to pay for things online. As we look at personalization, they expect that at every single touch point, from when they receive an email about something, when they're a prospect, through to conversion and sales, and through to service support and even loyalty programs, they expect everything to be a consistent message and so on. So I think it certainly starts at the top, and if you don't have that drive and I guess fundamentally budgets and so on and direction from the top, then you could just be fighting fires. And you know, the phrase whack-a-mole cropped up yesterday in politics. That's what you'd end up doing, thinking that, you know, constantly reacting to threats rather than using things like data to predict what the next best action to take, for example, in a customer journey may be, to stop that customer churn from happening.
Yeah. And this probably moves us on to, you know, the losers out there, okay, if that's the right description, you know, so cannot quickly adapt the customer experience, you know, can't provide an enhanced value proposition, you know, can't use their data in the most effective way for competitive advantage, all of these things. Do we think there will be, even for these losers, a simple baseline going forward in the new world, which is, if you simply do not have even some of what we would describe being, you know, digital and technology people, the basics in play, that you might not even be able to, you know, perhaps even open your outlet or your, you know, attraction or whatever it might be. So for an example could be, you know, you're in a consumer business which happens to be a, you know, an attraction park or a theme park, and at the moment you don't have the digital capability to sell tickets online. You don't have the digital capability to scan people's tickets at entry point, and then when they are inside the facility, you don't have the digital facility to make their experience much more pleasurable by giving them an allocated time to join the ride, as opposed to standing in a queue for 4 hours. You know, these things might appear quite simple, but actually, you know, they're probably, for businesses who are in the losing end of the scale right now, quite daunting, I suspect. Is that a reasonable comment or assumption to make?
I think it is. I think in all of this, if we go back to the basics of, you know, things like marketing and winning the hearts and minds and even wallets of people, customers will simply stop interacting with a brand they love, you know, even just after one bad experience. And it's even more so when it becomes a repeatable bad experience. And that bad experience now isn't just a, you know, something didn't arrive on time or was the wrong size. It can be a frustration. It can be that they tried to order something, and because of, you know, the kind of data side of the business of the brand that they're operating with, something seemed to be in stock and then suddenly wasn't in stock. So it's customers, you know, customers find it very hard to walk away from a brand that really understands them. So the more that a business can really get back in touch with what that customer need is, and the wants and wishes and desires and so on, then they have a great chance of getting back to where they were before this situation. You know, they say, you know, it takes seconds to lose a friend, but, you know, years to create a friendship, and that's, you know, ever so true in this current situation.
Yeah. So that's probably an interesting point. It sort of moves us on a bit to new opportunities, and I'll turn to Jonathan now in terms of, you know, can we kind of share some thoughts and ideas on what would be the quick wins here? Not necessarily the big new opportunities, but even quick wins by, you know, spinning up, you know, a mobile app for your consumer base, you know, as opposed to creating a loyalty program and maturing that loyalty program after 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You know, how difficult are the quick wins to just try and get you some progress? Is it easy to do this stuff from a technology point of view, or does it take a a timescale which actually a lot of businesses might not have the cash flow to last out that period, whether it's 6, 12, 9 months, 12 months, 24 months. How easy is it to capture new opportunities, and what are the quick wins, Jonathan?
Yeah, I think this comes back to your question you asked earlier, which is it binary? Majority of cases, it shouldn't be binary. So if you've started on a digital journey, then we're talking about levels of maturity. So whereas I think the previous couple of slides, we're really looking at those who haven't adapted to the customer experience in a good enough way, adding personalization, those who just use data reactively, those people who are kind of just getting on using the existing way of working with digital. That's kind of maturity level 1 type digital offering, where we used to have this great saying at Tesco, which was follow the customer, and customers no longer just want to have a standard e-commerce platform or a standard way of interacting with them. They want to have it more personalized. They want to know that that they're known, they're trusted, they can get more value out of the relationship with the retailer. So I think the opportunities there are really, really looking at can we capture a piece of digital technology that's going to accelerate us quickly? So it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to take a long time. And there are, in a minute, without giving anything away, we are going to share with you our thoughts on what a good modern architecture can lead to if you apply it in the right way. So this doesn't have to be a 2-year program. This could be a 3-month program to put in a new widget on the website. Sorry, did I say 3? Sorry, 3-week program to put in a new widget on the website, or maybe a new way of dealing with your customer segmentation, for example. So these things don't have to be big. They don't have to be expensive. And I think the latest technologies, certainly the cloud-based technologies, allow us to change the customer experience reasonably quickly. But that's got to assume you have some sort of digital base to work with in the first place. But even those companies that don't, we are seeing companies who are putting in a fledgling e-commerce platform, and those things can be successful as well. So these things don't have to be big, hairy and scary change programs like the likes we used to see when you're implementing a new ERP system, for example. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think in a minute we'll get to see a few tips and tricks around what sorts of things people can start to think about.
Yeah, I think it does answer the question, because I think where the debate is at the moment is, and this is a direct quote, which it's been verbalized by clients of ours who are tier 2 retailers, which is, there's one question I want you to help me answer, and that is, how do you, by a multiple of 10, accelerate my digitalization? Okay, so I suppose if you look under that question, it's both acceleration in time, clearly, but also, what do I need to do to make that happen from a skills, cost, investment basis? So that's where I was coming from, and I think your answer. I think what we're saying here is there are incremental, smaller steps that we can take, which might not be hugely disruptive, but might have an incremental benefit.
Yes, I would say so, and certainly, even if there is no digital proposition, the ability to create one can happen very quickly now, and there are many SaaS-based e-commerce platforms that you can implement in a matter of weeks if you don't have a digital capability. Those people that do have digital capability, it's about moving to the next stage of maturity. And the question is, where should the retailer focus? Should it focus on sorting out its efficiency in creating product details in the back end? Probably not. Should it focus on understanding the customers better, understanding who the customers are, and preparing a customer offering that is much more personalized? Yes. How do they do that? Well, that depends on the sorts of data available, the tools available, and the technology or technology partners available. So I don't know if that gives more weight. I think the next couple of slides probably give a bit more input into that. And yes, here we go.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, you know, these are probably some of the key areas that, Jonathan, you might want to talk about and give your view on, you know, what are the sort of the technology enablers, if you like.
Yeah, so it's obviously quite difficult to try and create 4 bullet points that catch everything, but in terms of where we see people investing now, and this is your million-dollar question around how do I 10 times accelerate my digital capability. I think the first thing to say is during the last 3 months, there has really only been digital, other than obviously the grocers and maybe some sort of local transport, but mostly just grocery has really accelerated beyond which we could never imagine. But interestingly, I was talking to a retailer recently who said to me, we're now at whereas our e-commerce business was 20% of our business, it's now 40%. And I said, no, actually, you're wrong. It's 100% at the moment because your stores are closed. So I know what he meant, but you then apply that to going forward. What that I think has enabled them to do is understand how good their e-commerce proposition could be, how good their digital proposition can be, who their customers are, what they want, and how they want to trade. But they only really can get there and accelerate things under using a number of techniques. And you know, I mentioned before around these little widgets you can apply to the website. Of course, you can apply new types of maybe chatbots to the site, or put in new multimedia type content management on top of the site to make it more attractive. But how does the customer want to engage better? Or how do you want to engage your customer better? Well, the first thing you've really got to do is the motto that I use is you can't improve what you can't measure. So you've got to be able to have a view of your data. Now it might sound simple and say, yeah, of course, but unlocking the data silos is something that a lot of retailers we know struggle with. So how do I create a single view of customer, for example? If I want to create a personalized customer experience, I have to somehow understand who my customers are. And I may have created a number of different systems through which my customers can actually interact with me. It could be customer services, it could be online, it could be social media, it could even be through marketplaces. How do I efficiently create that single view of customer, which enables me to understand who my customers are? Maybe they're the same customers, understand their behaviors and understand the sorts of things they like, and then personalize the offering back. So that would be, for me, one of the first things that any company wishing to exploit the customer relationship and really engage with customers in the best way, unlock those data silos and you know, use that to drive better behavior back to the customer.
And Jonathan, let me ask you a question on that. So these are the comment you made around speaking to a retailer very recently, and you turned around and said, no, 100% of your revenues are now online because your physical stores are shut. Where do you see this use of data and also the new world ending up in terms of combining the customer experience both in store and online? So, you know, do you think it's different depending on which sector you're in terms of, you know, what type of retailer or consumer business you are, you know, or do you think, you know, a lot of businesses might just say, well, I'm going to, you know, cut 50% of my physical outlets because actually society's changed now, so I'm driving more online. It's a smarter thing for me to do. It's, you know, I don't need, you know, retail premises, I don't need leases, so on and so forth. Or will it still be, in your view, you know, and you know, there's probably no right answer or wrong answer on this, a multi-channel, multi-touch point consumer sort of customer offering where you might be very loyal online, but you'll also go into the store, and when you go into the store, they'll still capture your data and they'll have a really end-to-end view of where you are as a customer.
Yeah, I wish I could predict the future. I don't think retail stores are dead. I think people always want to go and sit on furniture and try on clothes. But where that customer experience is going to change is how you interact with that customer. So whether there's digital technology in store, or as you were saying at the very basic level, it's no coincidence that more and more retailers wish to capture your data at the till. Customers don't see channels, they see a business, and they want to interact with that business in a seamless way across all of the ways that that customer is shopping. So if I buy something online, I want to be able to take it back in store or send it back anywhere. I want to be able to have the same experience that I have in shop that I do online. And I want to be able to be treated in the same way. If I look at some retailers, even now, you can't return stock to stores that you bought online and vice versa. It seems quite an odd experience. And similarly, the similar thing applies to different campaigns or emails you might receive. Why do I get an email from a loyalty card for that retailer that says something completely different to once I've purchased something in the shop, for example? Why am I getting two separate messages here? So I think the way that the customers will engage with the shops will change. I think there may be more behavior which moves people online more, for sure. And I think this period has really accelerated that. I think the way people interact with shops will probably change slightly and want to use more digital technology, but I don't think the actual shop itself is dead. But I think the way we can personalize the experience is going to be only if we can capture data at every touch point that the customer interacts with those retailers. And that's why I personally believe, and I know people we've been talking to, that you can only really improve that customer engagement if you understand those customers' behaviors at different touch points.
Yeah, which goes to your point of data, basically having good data in the right place and then understanding it, I guess, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay, and can you then perhaps explain what you mean by turbocharge the legacy? What does that mean, and what's the impact of this?
Yeah, so I think this comes back to the question that people are asking you around how do I 10 times accelerate my digital commerce. Often when we talk with retailers, a large constraint they have to do anything is these 20, 30-year-old ERP systems, or maybe even older mainframe systems that haven't been built for the purpose of omnichannel. Various household names, the likes of which all of us probably see every day, have large constraints in the way that they have built their legacy systems to pretty much not only do what they were meant to do in the first place, but also then expanded them to manage web orders or manage customer orders not from in-store or even in-store. So they've basically, the number of times I hear that someone has created web as another shop inside their ERP system. Yeah, it's great. It accelerates them to get to have a digital offering, but it provides so many dead ends. The amount of people I hear that have adapted and customized their ERP system to be an order management system, and now it's restricting them in terms of the number of channels they can actually fulfill to a customer. So, it's stopping me doing click and collect. It's stopping me doing fulfill from store, for example, because my ERP system won't allow me to do it. So in my mind, some of the core legacy assets are there to stay at least for now, because the cost of replacing an ERP system is expensive, and you don't always get your returns that you'd want to. It's not a revenue generating asset in effect. So how do I take those legacy assets, protect them, because you still need to create products, to create prices, to update your inventory. You still need those systems to do that. But how do I protect those systems while I'm adding in the new digital capability on top? So how do I add a new digital offering on top of my ERP? How do I strip out all of this warehouse management functionality that I might have embedded in my ERP system, or my order management functionality that I've embedded and customized within my legacy? And we have this concept of turbocharging a legacy, which means if you are able to provide some sort of modern technology, and it kind of, if you look at point 3, you can see where I'm going. You overlay your legacy systems with some sort of modern tech, which really would be, in my mind, something like a set of microservices that allow you to isolate your legacy systems from the outside world. And then you can overlay new digital capability, which talks to the microservices or APIs instead of talking directly to the legacy. In old, 10 years ago, we would see the old enterprise service bus tools doing that sort of thing. Problem is that they took a lot of investment, they were cumbersome, Some of them are a bit more lightweight now, but they were very expensive and they required a lot of heavy duty hardware, and it required a lot of people to run them and maintain them and monitor them and make them secure, etc. Now with the advent of microservices, that we see the ability to overlay those microservices on top of your legacy systems and then interact with those microservices instead of interacting with the legacy systems. And that's what we mean by turbocharging your legacy.
Okay, so is it fair then to say from a layman's point of view, because I'm conscious we've probably got non-technical audience members joining us today, that are you saying a majority of businesses out there will have a legacy system platform, whatever we describe it? You don't need to rip that out and start from scratch. You can build modules, microservices on top of that, which will accelerate, enhance your digital capabilities and customer offerings. Is that what you're saying, basically?
Correct. You can either build customized modules to do a particular business capability, or you can use the microservice layer, if you like, and layer it on top of your legacy system so that you are talking to the layer of microservices rather than talking to legacy. And then I can plug in those new capabilities by buying off-the-shelf products like order management or maybe your new shiny website, and also use that microservice layer to actually extract the data from your legacy systems as well and create that unlocking of your data silos at the same time.
Got it, understood. And then that leads to, I think what you're saying there is follow the customer. That flexibility, that speed that you might gain from this would allow you to follow the customer and improve the journey.
Yes, because the customers, as I said earlier, they expect to interact with the retailer as they interact with, say, Amazon, for example. I'm sorry to use the A word, but often people use that as a prime example of, if I was to do e-commerce, this is how I'd want to do it. Now, obviously, it's not always a complete omni-channel experience, but people know, and certainly, the new generation of shoppers, they know how they want to interact with shops. They want to interact with shops like they do with their smartphones, using TikTok or using Instagram. They want to be able to interact with the retail brands in a way they interact with the rest of their lives. You can't do that directly to a legacy system. So knowing that you want to be able to personalize the experience for customers, know that you want to give them some new ways of shopping and new ways of interacting with the brand. The technologies that we're talking about here would allow us to, number one, create new capabilities that the customers can interact with, and then number two, understand how they are interacting with those new ways of working, and using the data to really improve the relationship with that customer.
Okay, great. And I think our next slide probably puts a little bit of color around that from a diagrammatic point of view. Is that right, Jonathan?
Yeah, so look, this is just a reference architecture that's, or let's call it a marketecture, a combination of marketing and architecture, if you like. So this really shows what we're trying to talk about here. So, this isn't the answer for everybody, and certainly you don't need to put all of this in place. But if you were to have a if you start off, say, with the customer channels at the top, where you've got your different ways that the customer might interact with you, whether it's through a new or an e-commerce platform or various physical locations, even customer services, social media, marketplace, etc. And at the bottom of these operational systems that we've been talking about, some of those would be legacy systems. So the challenge is, how do I create new customer channels and new customer experience when I've got these legacy systems at the bottom? And what we see, in terms of using new technology as a way of doing that is, this is the yellow box in the middle. We've got those number one, the number one noted there. That's really for us a modern way of creating a microservices implementation between your legacy and your customer experience, your customer presentation layer, if you like, that enables you to put in new customer-facing things, widgets, channels, whatever they might be, without having to change the underlying legacy systems. So microservices is probably the most modern way of doing that, and it provides you the ability to plug in new capabilities very, very quickly.
Okay.
What that also enables you to do, though, do you want me to carry on, Adrian? Sorry.
Oh yeah, no. Let's have a quick couple of minutes on this. This is interesting, John.
Okay. So assuming you've got your microservices in place, and it doesn't have to be across all of your systems. This is, of course, showing you a finalized to-be end state architecture, which is great. Not many people have got there, but let's assume you've managed to do that, or over one or two of your systems. What those microservices allow you to do is then extract the data from each of those systems. So you can see where I've written the word events there. Those events are really pieces of data that have occurred as a result of an action. So maybe a customer buys a product, or inventory has been updated, or a product description has been updated. Those are all data events that can be captured through the microservices and then fed into really an operational data store of such. So this is where all of your transactional and reference data lives on a day-to-day basis, because the microservices that we're talking about here not only provide you with the APIs to integrate those systems, but also give the ability to transform that data as well. So if I've got new e-commerce platform, so let's take an example where a retailer may not have an e-commerce platform. They've only got physical locations, and now I want to introduce an e-commerce platform. Maybe it's my first foray into digital. You've got to somehow plug this e-commerce platform into those 6 systems at the bottom. By using a microservices approach, actually that e-commerce platform really only needs to talk to the microservices integration and let the microservices integration do the rest of the work. So if we manage to do that, then what I'm able to do is capture all of those transactions through that microservices platform and hold them within the operational data store, so I can transform that data and then move it on to the relevant systems that need to receive that data. But also what it allows me to do is create that one single view of data that we were talking about earlier. So if I've got customer data which lives in all my customer channels, and it might be the same customer data, or the same customer that lives across those different systems, I can now extract that data from those channels and hold that one single view of customer in that operational data store. And the important thing then is I can then engage, because I now know what that customer likes. I now have a full picture of that customer. I can then engage back to that customer using the information that I have to hand and personalize that, either an email that goes out to them as a campaign, or personalize the landing page on the website, or anything in between there. And then the third component really is, well, because I've got that operational data now, I can now hold that in a historical way, kind of the old data warehouses used to do, which are kind of using old technology architectures, if you like. This is a much more modern way of extracting data from the systems in real time and holding it in some sort of data lake that you can provide analytics and reporting on top of.
Okay.
Hopefully it gives you an idea of everything we've just been talking about.
Yeah, no, I think it gives us an idea of you can rapidly deploy some of these technologies. It's not perhaps as long and as drawn out perhaps as people might think, especially if you're starting from a legacy base. So no, I think that's been useful. So I'm conscious of the time. We've probably got a couple of minutes just to wrap up here, and I think it would be good to go back to both John and Jonathan here, and just maybe we could summarize what we think the key takeaways are, really, and also for any of our listeners at the moment, if you've any questions at all, then please just fire them through to the chat functionality, and we'll try and answer those as we go. So John Lowe, I don't know if you wanted to just maybe give your view on what you think the key takeaways are.
Sure. I mean, as well as what we have on the screen here, I think just to add and add into this some of the areas we've just discussed which aren't here, and I guess one of them is having that culture of agility across the business. About how do we implement some of these things that have been spoken about. So from a product management and software development perspective, there's a lot of great things that companies do with respect to agile. So DevOps and automation and commodity technology, codifying things and so on. But it's about taking that further, so things like agile marketing and digital ways of working, so that organizations can truly keep one step ahead of the competitors and even leapfrog in some cases. We spoke about customer engagement and customer engagement lifecycle. The winners are really the ones that understand that in great detail. They understand it isn't just marketing, it isn't just sales, it isn't just service and support. It's that entire, what I would call a circle now rather than a funnel, because if you get it right at every single point and you personalize that, you can turn the people who become your customers into loyal advocates. That increases the repeat visits, increase the lifetime customer value. They tell their friends, and in return, that means your customer acquisition cost can reduce. You don't have to invest heavily in paid media, PR versus free word of mouth referrals. But then, of course, having all of that, having an agile organization that can turn ideas into reality in a secure, scalable, predictable way, and having that customer engagement lifecycle understanding is all great. But of course, ideas and engagement activities need to be based on customer needs, activities, and actions which you get from data. Otherwise, you'll end up building things that no one wants, nobody needs, and become linked to potential opportunities to nudge a customer through to a sale, or even jump on a potential issue where a customer may churn and leave and express bad PR through social media. So as well as everything when we talk about personalization, there's those three things as well, which fundamentally we talk about data, getting that right, culture of agility, understanding the life cycle. Jonathan mentioned about the big projects. Very true that we don't have big budgets. We can't wait 3 years and invest 8-figure sums on new modernization. It's about the lighthouse projects, the things that will bring big value now, in conjunction with a wider strategic roadmap and continually iterating and improving the experience.
Okay. And Jonathan, just finally going to you, is there any other things in terms of key takeaways you would like to add? And just before you answer that, perhaps once you've answered it, if you could just add on the view that all of this, I'm assuming from your experience, starts with the strategic business plan and the direction of travel the business wants to go in. Okay, so stating what might be very obvious, I guess, or maybe not, who knows, that the direction of travel in terms of the customer experience, how the business wants to operate, whether it's omni-channel, multi-channel, physical stores, whatever, the business has to decide that, set a strategy at CEO level, but that has to be done in conjunction with the technology guys, right? So don't bring the technologists and digital guys in, right at the end of that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. To answer your last question first, we see technology as the business now. Every business that does digital, well, that is the business. Digital is the business now. So technology should be a partner at the board table, absolutely. In terms of just adding to what John was saying, it's not just about the tech, it's about the people and the leadership and the sponsorship and the processes. So don't forget that old legacy systems bring with it old ways of working. You're going to need to move towards more delivering what we call products. So digital products, whether that's e-commerce site or web chat or whatever it might be, you should think of those things as products or business capabilities and build your team around those products. It's much more of an agile way of working. The technology we showed earlier will give you the tech that enables you to be agile as a business, but you have to remember the people around that as well is particularly important. And with that comes, as I mentioned, the ability to map the technology enablers or the technology-enabled business change to the strategic roadmap of the business. Don't see this as I have to do these digital things and then I need the technology. Well, these digital things are your technology and the technology is your business. So, it needs to be thought of all as one, absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you, gentlemen. That's been very useful information, so appreciate that. So I think we've now naturally come to the conclusion of the webinar. Just to wrap up, I'd like to thank both John Lowe and Jonathan Summerfield, and of course all of our attendees. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. If you would like to have any further discussions or find out any more insights from Intuitus, then by all means visit our website or drop us an email at the following email address that's on your screen now. But we've come to the end of today's webinar, so thank you very much for everybody for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day.